Hilchos Maaser Sheini v'neta Rabbi perek shvi. The laws of the second tithe and the produce of the fourth year, chapter 7. Today we're going to be dealing with what can you buy with Maaser Sheini money. You have Maaser Sheini produce, you transferred it to money, what's allowed to be bought with the money. But first, the Rambam begins by telling us how severe we treat stuff that's bought with Maaser Sheini money. Halacha Aleph, Peres Hanil Koches, Bekesef Maaser Sheini. When you buy produce or fruit with money of Maaser Sheini, Einan Nifdin Berichuk Makim. Those fruit cannot be redeemed again when you're far away, when you're outside of Jerusalem. You get one chance. Once you redeem the produce onto money and you bought something with the money, that's it. It cannot be redeemed anymore. Elohim kenitmu ba'av hatuma, unless they became so impure with what's called a father level of impurity, primary source, like a dead body or a carcass of an animal or a rodent. Eloyalu hein atzman v'ye'achlu b'Yerushalayim. They themselves, the produce that you bought, needs to go up to Jerusalem and be eaten in Yerushalayim. Halacha beis zeh choimer b'lakuach b'kesef meiser miperes meiser atzman. This turns out to be a stringency in something bought with the money of meiser over and above the Maaser Sheini produce themselves. The Maaser Sheini produce themselves could be redeemed. And here you're saying, once you're a level down, you can't be redeemed anymore. If they become impure with what's called a baby or a child level of impurity, then since biblically they're still pure, so they can be redeemed in this state and be eaten in Jerusalem. But by default, no such thing. And the Rabbi has a long talk on this where he discusses the point that I mentioned a couple of days ago, how according to the Rambam, the idea of allowing you to transfer Maaser Sheini produce to money is not just a plan B. Like ideally, you should bring the produce to Jerusalem. If you can, Torah has mercy on you, says, you can transfer it to money. There's two ways to fulfill the mitzvah. One way to fulfill the mitzvah is by bringing the produce to Yerushalayim. Another equally biblical way to fulfill the mitzvah is to redeem the produce onto money. Both options are before you. And there's a special halacha when it comes to the produce that's bought with the money that was transferred from Maaser Sheini, that it becomes stricter, what's called tafel chamur min ha'ikar. Sometimes a secondary level can become more severe than the core level. The core level of Maaser Sheini produce can be redeemed. Secondary level cannot be redeemed. What's the lesson? The Rabbi draws two lessons from this halacha. Number one, there are two types of holiness in this world. Some things are born holy, some things are made holy. For example, we're going to see in the next set of laws, Bechor. A person who's born firstborn, or an animal that's born firstborn, is holy from the womb. Nothing you can do to influence the holiness. Then you have like Truma and Maaser, where you get to make the holiness. Right? You get to separate the produce from your grain for the Kohen, for the Levi. Then you have Maaser Sheini, which is like the highest level. You literally create the holiness. By transferring it to money, you create it. So a person might think, what's greater? Something born holy, right? Something that Hashem makes holy. Says the Rambam, no, sometimes the Jews' influence on the world, what you make holy, Hashem has more pleasure from. What's called the Maaser Adecha Tichsof. Hashem yearns for our deeds. We make something that's not naturally holy into something holy. That's a fantastic thing. Yes, awakening from below versus awakening from above. On the other hand, by the way, the Rebbe on a different occasion said another lesson. He said, just because you schlepped something down into nature doesn't mean you should schlep it more. Kind of an opposite lesson. Maaser Sheini is holy, right? We gave you a chance. He said you could redeem it onto money, kind of bring it into a lower level. But once you brought it into a lower level, don't go further. Don't go redeeming it again. Once is enough. Same thing, B'chlal, the way a Jew engages with the world. Everyone always says you can't just rely on Hashem. You have to also make a vessel, in nature, in teva. Okay, but not too much. Just one. You don't need more. It's like a guy who has an urn. We have an urn over here, right, with hot water in the morning. So imagine a guy tries pressing down on the water to get some water, and there's no water. So he says, you know what? Okay, maybe I should add another spout. Add another spout. There's going to be more water. No, obviously not. If there's no water in the urn, doesn't matter how many spouts you make, you're not going to get water. So the same thing is with Hashem's blessings. Hashem's blessings is the water. We get to make a spout. You go to business, you go to work, but how many spouts can you make? Making more spouts, if it's not water, if there's no water inside, it's not going to bring more blessings. That's why a Jew every morning davens. And after he davens, he sits and learns. And then you go to work, and then you say, Hashem, look, I made my spout. Now you bring the water. So that's the takeaway here. But at any rate, that's what we begin with. We begin with how severe it is to buy produce with Maaser Sheini money that it can no longer be redeemed. Now let's go to what you can actually buy. Halacha Gimel, Ein nilkach bekesef Maaser. You cannot buy with Maaser Sheini money, Ella, only the following things. Maichal Adam shegidulav min haaretz, food fit for human consumption that grows from the earth, or gidulav min haaretz, or things that grow from that which grows from the earth. Like the details specified by the Torah, babakar uvatzayin uvayayin uvashecher. Torah makes mention of four things, right? This is the verse on the full verse on the screen. It says, you take the money and you put the money b'chol asher ta'aven nafshecha, whatever your soul wants, but it gives examples. Babakar uvatzayin, cattle and sheep, uvayayin uvashecher, and wine and intoxicating drinks. Which means it has to be either things that grow from the ground or like animals that feed off the grass that grows from the ground. Lefichach, therefore, ein loikchin bekesef Maaser, we cannot buy the following things with Maaser money. Mayim v'melach, water and salt, kmein upitrios, mushrooms and truffles, different types of mushrooms. Lefisha ein giduleihem min haaretz, because these things don't grow from the ground. Water is a natural resource. Salt is also a mineral, doesn't grow from the ground. And truffles and mushrooms don't have any roots. They're fungi. They feed off the air, not off the earth. Neither can you buy v'lei peiros mechubarim lakarka. You cannot buy produce that's still attached to the ground. V'lei peiros she'enon yechelim lahagia l'Yerushalayim. Nor can you buy what we'd call today perishable foods that won't be able to make it to Yerushalayim. L'fi she'enon daimin l'bakar v'tzayin. Because those aren't like cattle and sheep. Cattle and sheep, if you bought them, you'd be able to take them straight to Yerushalayim. They'll never spoil till you get there. So whatever you buy has to be non-perishable. Halacha hey, hadvash v'habeitzim v'hachalav, honey and eggs and milk. Go back to this picture we see over here, the eggs, some honey, some milk. Harehin kebakar v'tzayin. They are like animals, cattle and sheep. Why? Sha'afal pi she'enon gidulei karka, even though they don't grow from the ground, harehin gidulei giduleha. They're the growths of the growths, right? Where does honey come from? Bees, but where does the honey really come from? From flowers. Right? The bees are bringing the pollen, so it grows from the ground essentially. Eggs, of course, come from the animals which feed off the ground. So does milk, same thing. Halacha vav hatemed. Temed is a specific type of liquid. Basically, you take wine dregs, wine sediment, and you pour water over it to get like a grape juicy texture. So the Rambam says, ad shaloi hechmitz, before it turns to vinegar, because that was the point of it. You would pour water onto the wine dregs and get like this grape juicy texture, and then you would let it ferment and become vinegar. So before it becomes vinegar, ein milkach bekesef Maaser, you cannot buy it with Maaser Sheini money. It's like water. But once it ferments, turns into vinegar, milkach, it can be bought, kiyayin ukeshecher, just like wine or other intoxicating drinks. If you bought it, you weren't supposed to. You bought it with Maaser Sheini money before it became fermented, but then later on it fermented. Kana Maaser. Retroactively, the Maaser Sheini acquires it. Halacha zayin bamed dvarim amurim. When do we say this restriction? That there's a difference before fermenting, after fermenting. B'nasan shloisha mayim umatza paches me'arba. If your ratio was less than 3-1, in other words, you put in 3 measures of water, and you didn't even get 4 measures of the texture using the wine dregs. Avalim nasan shloisha v'hitzi arba. But if you put in 3 measures of water, and you came out now with 4 measures, that means a lot of the wine texture went into it. Hareza kiyayin mazug. That's like any other diluted wine. V'nilkach bekesef Maaser, and it can be bought with Maaser money. Today we don't really know this because our wines are already diluted. But in those days, when you made real strong wine
today is diluted?
Yeah, it's always mixed with water before it gets to the bottle. In olden times, when they made wine, proper, pure, strong wine, it was super strong, and they had to dilute it as part of the preparation process. And the typical diluting ratio was 3-1. So therefore, in other words, if you think about it, when you had a cup of wine, it was 3/4 water. So the Rambam says if you use this wine dregs and you have 3/4 water, 1/4 winey texture, that's already considered wine, and you can buy it with Maaser Sheini money. Halacha ches, lul ve'zradin ve'hecharuvim, vine shoots and carob shoots. This is a vine, just to bring out the points over here, all these different parts of the branch. But the point is, before it grows fully, it begins with like these little shoots, and they're soft. And the Rambam describes how, at least in times of old, they used to boil them and eat them. It was like a delicacy. So, the same thing for carob shoots. When the carobs begin to grow, their branches could also be soft and edible to a certain point. So the Rambam says, Ad shelo yamtiku, before they become sweet, they're in such an early stage of their growth, ein nilkachin, they cannot be bought with Maaser Sheini money. Achar sheyamtiku nilkachin. After they become sweetened, you can buy them with Maaser Sheini money because they're edible. Aval haluf, but luf, the way the Rambam describes it as basically two definitions. Some say it's this one, pronounced in Latin the Colocasia aquarium, something like that. Basically, it's known as taro. You know the taro vegetable? That's this one. And this one is what's called Arum palestinum in Latin. Has a berry with lots of leaves. That's the common translations for luf.
Are the leaves edible?
I don't know.
It's not a mulberry, is it?
No, it's not a mulberry. Those red stuff are bigger. They're individual berries. So luf, v'hachargal and mustard seed. That's this. V'haturmasin, a rough bean. Hasn't really been identified, but it's a bean that takes a long time to cook and soften.
It's a round and yellow. I know that.
What? Turmasin?
The turmeric.
Maybe in modern Hebrew. I don't know. In Mishnaic Hebrew, they don't know which bean it is specifically. But it's a tough bean. Ushar kol hanichbashim, or any other thing which is usually pickled. Bein misha yamtiku, bein ad yamtiku, whether you bought them before or after they got sweetened, nilkachin, they can be bought with Maaser Sheini money. Why? Because they're always pickled before you eat them. The hakoyer, where's my koyer? Koyer is hearts of palm. Hearts of palm, nilkach bekesef Maaser, can be bought with Maaser Sheini money because it's edible. Halacha tes, hakarkoim, saffron, this stuff over here, one of the most expensive spices in the entire world. Einay nilkach, it cannot be bought with Maaser Sheini money. She'einay ella lemara, typically it was only used to add appearance. V'chein kol kayetze bay. The same thing applies to all similar things, herbs essentially, minoisnei reach umara v'tam, that are there to add a smell, or an appearance, or a taste. Hoyil ve'enon la'achilas gufan, ela l'tam shenoisnin, since they don't contribute with their bodies. In other words, you're not meant to eat them purely. They're only there to add taste. Einan nilkachin bekesef Maaser. They cannot be bought with Maaser Sheini money. Lefichach, therefore, Rashi besamim. Rashi besamim is translated as heads of spices, but specifically the commentaries refer to cinnamon. Where is it here? Cinnamon and nutmeg. And also, what is this over here? Spikenard. That's what this thing is called. Yes. The hapilpilin and peppercorn. That's this. The hakoisht, costus, type of spice that was actually in the ketoris, in the incense. The hachiltis is asafoetida. It's this spice here, this herb. The chalois choria and safflower. The chol kayetze ba'il, any of these, anything similar to these things, einan nilkachin bekesef Maaser, cannot be bought with Maaser Sheini money because again, they're there to contribute. They're not there to be consumed on their own. Halacha Yud hasheves. Sheves is either translated as dill or anise. Anise is another type of herb. It was also used in cooking. In litain tam bikdeira, so it depends what you're using it for. If you're using it only to contribute a taste to the food, einan nilkachas bekesef Maaser, you cannot buy it with Maaser Sheini money. V'im lekamach v'chayetze bay, but if it's being used for a dip or something like that, shehu oichel gufa, where you're planning to eat the dill or the anise, nilkachas bekesef Maaser, then it could be bought with Maaser Sheini money because you're going to consume the body of the spice of the herb. Eirav mayim umelach. Let's say you mixed water and salt, right? So in the beginning of the chapter we said you can't buy water, you can't buy salt because they don't grow from the ground. What if you mixed water and salt and now you made like a salt water? Im nasan l'soichei shemen, if you also added some oil, harehin kimurias, now it becomes like a brine, like a pickling brine. The lekeach man bekesef Maaser, and you can use it or you can buy it with Maaser Sheini money. Umavlia dmei hamayim v'hamelach bidmei hashemen, and you swallow the price of the water and the salt with the price of the oil. In other words, really, of this brine, only the oil can be bought with Maaser Sheini money. So you charge extra for the oil, and you include the price of the water and salt as though you're only buying the oil, but you're also buying the mixture. Halacha Yud Aleph, ein loikchin trumais bekesef Maaser. Here's a Kohen. He has Maaser Sheini money, and he wants to go and buy truma bread. Should be fine, right? Because he's a Kohen, he can eat truma. Says the Rambam, no. we don't buy truma with Maaser Sheini money, mipnei shehu memayet achilasai ba'achilasa. Because now you're lessening, you're making more restrictions on the eating from both sides. If you buy truma loaf with Maaser Sheini money, it now has both holinesses. It has the holiness of truma and Maaser Sheini. Truma has its own restrictions, which don't apply to Maaser Sheini. Maaser Sheini has its own restrictions, which don't apply to truma. Now you're putting both restrictions, you're making holy food less accessible, not allowed. Because truma can only be eaten by koyanim, first of all, who, if they were impure, went to the mikveh and waited till the sun set. That's the restrictions. Muravei shemesh, that means they waited till after sunset. Ha'arev shemesh is sunset. That's the restrictions. Truma is able to be eaten even by a Kohen who is in a state of deep mourning the first day, and he can eat it wherever he wants, not just Jerusalem. On the other hand, the Maaser, now you're making it Maaser Sheini, muter lezarim v'litvul yoim. It's permitted for non-Kohanim, and it's even permitted for somebody who went to the mikveh without waiting for sunset. It's forbidden for a person in deep mourning, and it can only be eaten in Jerusalem. So you're lessening the eating of the Maaser and the Truma. Now it can only be eaten by a Kohen who waited till sunset, not mourning, in Jerusalem. So you put all the restrictions on him. He lost from both sides, no good. Halacha Yud Beis, loikhin behema lezivchei shlamim hashlamim mikesef hamaiser. You can use Maaser Sheini money to buy an animal for a sacrifice. Shlamim, peace offering. Why? It's becoming holy. Shahashlamim ne'echalu mazarim, because the peace offering is eaten by even by non-Kohanim. The owners get a part in it. So you're not destroying or limiting the Maaser Sheini's access. So what happened? Barishaina, in the beginning, hayulaykhin behemais la'achlan chulin mikesef Maaser Sheini. People, cheap Jews, little workarounds they wanted. They used to buy animals to eat them not as a sacrifice, as chulin, using Maaser Sheini money, kedela havricha me'al hamizbeach, to escape them, to make them escape from the mizbeach. Why? Because even though when you bring a peace offering, you get some parts, but the Kohanim also get some parts. They wanted more meat. So they stopped bringing it as sacrifices. Gazru Beis Din. Beis Din actually made a decree that not only is it permitted to buy sacrifices, you have to. She'ein loikhin behema mima'is meiser ela lishlamim. If you buy an animal with Maaser Sheini money, it has to become a peace offering. But non-domesticated animals, which anyways cannot be brought as a sacrifice, like a deer, for example, or a bird, you can buy those with Maaser Sheini money, she'einon ru'uyin lishlamim, because they cannot even be brought as a peace offering, even if you wanted to. Yud Gimel ein loikhin peiros shvi'is bekesef meiser. You cannot buy shmita fruit with Maaser Sheini money, lefishu chayav levayer k'maishi yizbayer, because you have to destroy it, as we're going to explain in the laws of Shemitah year. That Rambam is going to tell us that any produce that remains after the Shemitah year, at a certain point, needs to be destroyed. So if you buy that fruit with Maaser Sheini money, you're limiting, again, its access. You're not going to be able to eat it for as long of a time. If somebody buys water or salt, or fruit attached to the ground, or produce which cannot reach Jerusalem, any of these things on this list over here, which is not allowed to be bought with Maaser Sheini money, but you did, loy kana ha-Maaser, says the Rambam, it's so much so that the Maaser doesn't even acquire it. Afal pisha yatsu hamois lechulin, even though the money is transferred to ordinary produce, to ordinary level, So you've done nothing. You haven't given Maaser Sheini anything, and the money goes out to be ordinary. The commentaries say what you have to do is you have to take other money and eat that value in Jerusalem. But what you did was so negative that you don't get Maaser and you lose the holiness of the money. Halacha tezvav halekeach peiros chutz lirushalayim bekesef Maaser. Can you buy produce outside Jerusalem with Maaser Sheini money? Remember, when you transfer the holiness to the money, the mitzvah is to take the money to Jerusalem and buy stuff there. What if you bought produce with the money outside of Yerushalayim? You see, it says here the vegetable Tzfat market. So he's in Tzfat still buying produce. It says the Rambam, b'shoigig, if you did it inadvertently, you didn't realize that you were using Maaser Sheini money. We forced the seller to give back the money to the owners. And they remain Maaser Sheini holy as they were. B'mezid, if he bought it willfully, he knew what he was doing, he knew he was holding Maaser Sheini money, and he still bought produce outside of Yerushalayim, Yalu haperes v'yachlu b'Yerushalayim. So then we tell him, hey, take the produce to Yerushalayim and go eat it there. V'im ein mikdash, if there's no temple nowadays, yanichem ad sheyirakvu. You must leave them to rot. Halacha tazayin v'chein ein leikchin behema bekesef Maaser chutz l'Yerushalayim. You also shouldn't buy an animal with Maaser Sheini money outside of Yerushalayim. Again, the ideal way is you take the money itself and you use the money in Yerushalayim. You can't buy outside. If you did, v'im lakach, if you bought an animal outside of Jerusalem with Maaser Sheini money, b'shaygeg, if you did it inadvertently, yachzru hadamim limkaiman. The money should go back to their place. Like in the last case, seller give back the money. B'mezid, if you did it purposely, tale v'te'achel b'Yerushalayim, okay, nothing to do after the fact. Take the animal, eat it in Yerushalayim. V'im ein mikdash, if there's no holy temple, tikaver hiva oira. You must bury it and its skin. Doesn't mean you have to kill it right now, but the point is you can't have any benefit from it. At the end of the day, it has to just be buried. Halacha yudzayin lokach avadim v'karkoyis u'behema tmeya. A person buys with Maaser Sheini money slaves, real estate, or non-kosher animals. Bein b'mezid, bein b'shegeg, whether on purpose or by mistake. Im barach hamoicher, if the seller runs away, so you can't get the money back, take money of equal value to Yerushalayim and eat it, treat it as Maaser Sheini. Zeh haklal, this is the general guiding rule. Kol shehoitzi, chutz la'achilo shesiya v'sicha midmei ha'maaser. Anytime you spend Maaser Sheini money for anything other than food or drink or anointment or creams, ubarach hamoicher oimeis, and the seller died or ran away, yoichal kenegda, you must eat equal value of money in Yerushalayim. If the seller was still around, bring the money back from the seller. Same thing if you brought other sacrifices, burnt offering, sin offering, guilt offering, of which you have no portion, you must eat an equal amount of money in Yerushalayim as Maaser Sheini money. What if you bought a non-domesticated animal with the intention of bringing it as a shlomim, which is not allowed? You can't bring a non-domesticated animal as a korban. Or you bought a domesticated animal for what's called besar taiva, just, a barbecue. You didn't want to bring it as a sacrifice, even though you're supposed to. It's worthless. It's like buying an ox for plowing. You didn't acquire it. It doesn't become holy. Lokach behema lishlamim. What if you did what you were supposed to? You bought an animal for a sacrifice. Then it got a blemish. So now it can't be bought as a sacrifice. Paka mimeno kedushas Maaser. So here, since you did everything you're supposed to do, you actually get an exemption. The holiness of Maaser Sheini leaves. Upaida oisa, you have to redeem it like you would redeem any holy sacrifice which got a blemish. Ve'en adam min Maaser, but the money that you used to redeem it doesn't become Maaser Sheini. In other words, Maaser Sheini is out. It evaporates. The afal pk, nevertheless, since it's still holy, in pedal la'atzmai ma'isiv chaimesh. If you redeemed it on your own, you must add a fifth. Which seems obvious, right? Because anytime you have consecrated property, you must add a fifth. The commentaries explain, it's what's called in Gemara language, zil hacha kamad chile, zil hacha kamad chile. Anywhere you go, they push you away. This animal has like a Maaser Sheini standpoint and a sacrifice standpoint. If you go to the Maaser Sheini, they say, no, it's a sacrifice. If there's a sacrifice, they say, no, it's Maaser Sheini. So since each one pushes you away to the other one, you might think you don't have to add a fifth. Says the Rambam, you do. Halacha yutes, hamatfis ma'is Maaser lishlamim. A person has Maaser Sheini money. He doesn't buy a peace offering. He simply says, this is going towards a peace offering. Like kanu shlamim. Just with the verbal expression, shlamim, the sacrifice, doesn't acquire it. Shekdushas shlamim eina chala al kedushas Maaser. The holiness of the shlamim sacrifice cannot take effect over and above the holiness of the Maaser money produce. Sheha Maaser mamin gavayahu, because the Maaser Sheini belongs to Hashem. You can't overrun that. Ve'in sarich leimar, needless to say, im hitfis ha-Maaser atzman l'shlamim. If you took not Maaser Sheini money, Maaser Sheini produce, and you want to attach it to being a shlamim, shalei kanu shlamim, certainly the shlamim does not acquire it, because again, it's Maaser Sheini holiness. Nothing can override that. If you transfer it to money and you buy an animal with the money, fine, that works. But just to say it doesn't do anything. Halacha chaf, a very interesting expression here from the Rambam. I don't think you find it anywhere else. Ha'oichel Maaser Sheini b'teiras chulin. A person, by mistake, he has some Maaser Sheini produce, he eats it thinking that it's chulin, that it's regular produce. Afilu b'meizer, or even if he does it purposely. What do you do? Is there a way to correct it? So the Rambam says, in Peres HaMaaser Atzman Ochal, if you had eaten the actual Maaser Sheini produce, here's the unusual Rambam's wording, Yitzak Lashamayim. You have nothing else to do. You can cry to Hashem. That's all you can do. Cry to heaven, try to do teshuvah, but nothing tangible can be done. If you consumed Maaser Sheini money, you used it for regular breakfast instead of bringing it to Yerushalayim, Yachzru damim limkaimam, v'yalu v'ye'achlu b'Yerushalayim. Either, if you can get the money back, bring it back to its original place, bring them back to Yerushalayim, Oy yoichal kenegdan b'Yerushalayim im ein yachal hachzir sadamim. If you cannot bring the money back, at least go to Yerushalayim with equal value amount of money, bring it there and eat stuff there as Maaser Sheini, and that will be your tikkun, that will be your correction.